Welcome to In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm your host, Jay Daniels. Earlier this year, jazz vocalist Robin McKelle shared a new album with us. It's called Alterations, and it features her jazz interpretations of songs made popular by women like Jolene from Dolly Parton, Back to Black from Amy Winehouse, and Rolling in the Deep from Adele. In this special interview, I asked Robin about the special relationship between modern pop music and jazz. You'll also hear her thoughts on how she hopes these recordings will impact her listeners. Here's Robin McKelle. What was it about the women on this project that really connected most with you?
I think for me, they were all not only performers, but they were writing their music as well. So I think there's something that comes out in that music. And I would say specifically to Adele and Amy Winehouse and Lana Del Rey, for me, I think going forward in the future, I think we will have, the standards of what we are living in today. The contemporary music of today will become timeless and standards for, the next generations to come. And I do believe that Adele in pop music and Adele and Amy Winehouse are definitely in that umbrella. They live under that umbrella. And Lana Del Rey, I think she's a little underrated as a songwriter. I think she writes some really beautiful songs. I think sometimes her songs don't come through as personal as they really are because of all the production and everything over them. But if you really strip everything away, there's some really beautiful music that she's written and lyrics. And I have, the genre of musical styles on the album is really diverse, and that's something that really speaks to me as well, because I love so many different types of styles and music, and this is something that is evident in my sound. So that was important for me as well, to choose artists who were from all these different genres: jazz, pop, rock, blues, R&B or whatever. It's just, that is something for me. Like I have a very difficult time putting things into a box of genres. So for me, that was something that I was like, okay, I think I can take all of this stuff and make it into something that sounds like me and what I do, because they all have influenced what I do.
And I do want to discuss a little bit more here in just a moment. 14 years ago, you released one of your first albums, and it is what you would call a seminal work. Introducing Robin McKelle was the name of that album, and it featured your vocals accompanied by a big band. And you mentioned that word standards. We typically think of standards as songs from the past, but let's face it, the songbook and standards are ever evolving, as is your sound. Let's compare where you were in 2006. I don't want to think of your current work as a departure from where you were. I think it's more of an evolution. You go from a really jazz-centric, a classic jazz-centric sound with a big band to what you have now on Alterations. What musical elements did you seek to include on this release?
For this, I wanted to, it's interesting you're speaking of the first album, because it is very traditional jazz. And the reason that I sang that music like that was because that's what the music called for. I was serving the music. This was a big band album of traditional big band music, and it wouldn't be right if I went in there and sang all these, R&B riffs over it, or if I sang it in my little style. It would sound like, what is this? And all I can think about is a teacher that I had at college thinking, just swing it, just sing the song and, swing it. So I was like, okay. And, you have to have a big voice to sing over a big band like that. So that was something that I was drawn to. But on the other hand, it was important to me to be able to evolve and do other things. And that's just one part of my voice and one part of my artistry. So for Alterations, I really feel that I've kind of come, not really full circle, because I don't think it's a full circle, but it is me coming back to a more of a jazz mentality, because I kind of went into a thing. I did a soul album, and I did like maybe more of a poppy album and whatnot. But this album really kind of combines everything into one, which is all of those parts and all of those sounds in me. And I'm able to interpret these songs in a way that it shows my vocal not the ability, it's not about showing the ability, but I'm able to sing with a lot of power and strength and a little grit on, like, let's say, for example, Mercedes-Benz, and get in there and be like bluesy and get in with the groove. And then I'm able to step back and sing something really delicate, like Don't Explain or Born to Die. And those are things that I'm able to do in a live show that I was never able to present on an album, because it's very difficult to do all of those different things on an album and make it sound cohesive. So I think that my goal was to find a way to be able to really get back to my true, not my true self, but my singing part, like really be able to interpret the music, worry only about singing the song. And that's my first love, is singing the songs. So that was my my idea and why I chose to do covers, because it allowed me, it was just a tool, and it was kind of like it was the bed that I could create over, and I could lay these textures over, because it was something that I felt it was attainable to do. Something, I hear it differently when it's written by someone else as opposed to when I write the song.
And these arrangements specifically have a great deal of space where musically, the vocalization, the instrumentation, they can organically grow. It is, compared to some of these pop recordings, this is not an overly produced album. It comes across very naturally, and I think that's what's so appealing about it. And I want to talk about developing the thematics of the arrangements for these pieces. And I want to look at it from two different yet similar angles. So you talk about getting back to your true self, just singing the song, just telling the stories through the song. So I want to talk about this relationship between jazz and pop, specifically as it relates to this album. What jazz elements influenced your arrangements of these pop songs? And on the other hand, how did their inherent pop elements influence your jazz concepts?
That's a deep question. I guess I'll start with the first part. What elements of the jazz it was influenced the music? For me, when I heard the song, like after I chose the songs, I started with tons of songs, and I narrowed it down. And there were songs that just jumped out at me that I thought, I know that I can hear. I can hear an acoustic bass line on this. I can hear different chords, and for me, one of those is, for example, No Ordinary Love. It's a very simple harmonic song, and there's really not that much happening harmonic-wise in the chords in Sade's original version. It's all about the groove and her. She's just phenomenal. Her voice is just great vibe. So that leaves place for, that left an idea for me. I can hear a lot of reharmonizations with it. I can hear things, and me being a piano player and really loving to arrange and everything, I thought, what can I do with this? If something already has a lot going on and like it's really dense in the harmony, it's difficult. I mean, you can always take things away. But that was interesting to me for a lot of these songs. So for pop music, it's much more simple. The harmonies usually are simplified, and so it leaves space to add harmonically there. And also texturally, I could just hear, I could hear it with, the drums, or I could hear a bass line, for example. And on the other side of it, the other part of the question, how does pop influence the jazz, is that I think at times jazz can be off-putting to people because they think that they can't or they don't like jazz because it's too much or it's too intellectual for them. So I think it's important for jazz artists to sometimes to think of the listener and say, what would is the listener going to get this? Is the listener going, and it's not all about doing all things for the listener, but I think as an artist, there is a fine line for me, for what I do. I like that my audience is, they can connect with it. And so many times after a show, I will hear people say to me, like, I've never seen a jazz concert before. This was my first one. I didn't know that I loved jazz. And the way, and I say, thank you. That's great. Keep listening. And in my heart, I think like, well, I'm not sure if I could call what I do like strictly jazz, but there are elements of it. I mean, it is jazzy. There is jazz parts in it. There's a lot of solos. There's improvisation. Sure. But jazz is like an umbrella, also like pop. There are so many different types underneath this umbrella. So I think music in general, it influences others. But I do try to, first I think about what it is that I want to say and what feels right to me. But also, how is my audience going to hear this? And how are they going to be able to relate with it? Or is it too out? Or is it me? Do I feel authentic in presenting this, you know?
How does Alterations speak to where you are on your musical journey?
Well, I would say it's right up there with my whole life. I'm taking everything and finagling it around and moving these parts and moving these pieces and these puzzle pieces to really continue to evolve. And I don't want to keep making the same album. I think that's one thing. I can look back at my career after 8 albums and I say, oh wow, I've made a lot of turns. And in the moment, I never think about it like that. I'm like, oh, why are people they're saying that this is a soul album and now I'm not doing jazz anymore and I don't get it. There's so much jazz in this album. But the thing is jazz and soul and R&B, they all are a part of me. So I always have a difficult time, deciphering between it. But as I do look back and I listen, sometimes I listen to the different albums and the different music, I say, wow, I did do a lot of different stuff, different styles, different approaches. And for me, that's been the fun part of it, is to explore all those parts of myself and my artistry and my voice and my being.
We talk about how does this speak to you and your journey. I also think about these songs. And many of these female composers are still living. They're still honing their craft. And I think about these songs that even, an Amy Winehouse or Adele that's been around for maybe 9-10 years, you hear the melody, you immediately know the words. How do you think your interpretations of these songs, how do you think that impacts how people perceive those works?
That is interesting. I mean, I think the highest form of flattery is when someone does a cover of your song. Whether you like it or you don't like it, they felt touched enough to take your song and do something either the same or different with it. So I look at it as like, okay, I respect these women. I've done it. I mean, they may hate, well, I don't know. I mean, and people too, what I've done with a lot of this music is completely change it. And that was the concept of the album, is to take it out of its original form and change it. And, a lot of people really love it. And there are some people who are just like, what is this? I don't get it. So, and I respect that. Everyone is totally able to have their own opinion about that. And I think the key thing is it gives these songs, it breathes new life into these, a different life into the songs. And it actually, for me, some of the lyric that I interpret of these artists, I'm sure that I'm interpreting it from a different place. Like, for example, the Lana Del Rey song, I look at that as a mature woman who has gone through a hellish breakup, a hellish relationship, something that really didn't go well, and in a deep, dark moment of thinking like, I'm not going to make it, but you've gone through it, you've done it, you've made it through, your life happens, you realize you think you can't get through something, but as you grow older and we go through difficult times, you realize like you will get there, you will get past that hump. And I think so for me, I say, okay, well, yes, it's a sad and it's a dark song, but I look at it with a sense of like, well, there's hope to this. And for me, adding in this beautiful trumpet solo by Marquise Hill opens up this song in a way, and it makes it breathe, and it gives you this feeling of hope. And so there's a different interpretation there from what she probably wrote the song about, and versus where I'm interpreting it and singing like the way that where I'm coming from. And which is normal, because you wouldn't sing something the same if you're a 20-something-year-old versus a 40-something-year-old person. You just live life differently. You've experienced different things.
Have you had anyone cover your songs by chance? I mean, your own compositions?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like people, I find things sometimes on YouTube that I have a Google thing. It's like, oh, your name came up, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I was like, all right, I never even really thought about okay, well, this is cool. Yeah.
We were talking about how you saw your sound evolve from 2006 to now in 2020. How do you see it continuing to evolve from this point forward?
I think, if I just stay really true to where I am in the music, I think it comes out kind of naturally. I know that every time I make an album, I learn things about myself, my voice, my creative process, who I want to work with, the type of people I want to be around. And I think it's every time I make an album, I feel like I'm getting closer to the best version of myself. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to get there, but I'm trying.
Do you ever find that the longer that you go on in life, the more that you're discovering about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah.
One last question. Why music?
To be honest, it was the only thing that I really ever wanted to do. I grew up, I came out of my mom said I was singing before I was talking. So I always loved music. I just had to figure out what my path was and how I was going to, do it. Like, was I going to be a music theater person, or was I going to, be more of an opera singer, or how was I going to make this life for myself? And I love music. It's kind of just a part of who I am, I think. And I love the freedom I love where it's taken me. I've met people. I've gone to so many places around the world, and, it's just incredible what music has given me in my life.
Robin McKelle, our guest for this week's In Studio from Simply Timeless. The album is called Alterations, and you can find out more information at her website, robinmckelle.com. Special thanks to Robin for chatting with us, and a special thanks to you, our listener, for joining us also. Until next time, I'm Jay Daniels. Thanks for listening to In Studio from Simply Timeless.